From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of the meaning of the 13 principles of God's mercy. We know that one of the greatest revelations God ever gave to human being was in the days of Moshe when he asked, Harini na kvodecha, show me your glory. He said he'll pass all the glory by him, and he passed by and he said that God is God, Hashem, Kel, mighty, Rachum v'chanun, he's merciful and kind. Erech Apayim, he's very slow to anger. Rav Chesed v'emed, lots of kindness and lots of truth. Chesed lafim, he keeps the kindness for generations. It goes on and on. 13 principles of God's mercy. We invoke these 13 principles in our slichot. Sephardic Jews and Nusach Sfard, like Anshe Sfard, our congregation here in Memphis, we say it every day because it's so powerful and so important based on the Ari. And Ashkenazic Jews say it during slichot only. And on Yom Kippur, where we have slichot inserted into the prayers. What is the meaning of these 13 principles? Now, the Gemara says that, Rabbi Yochanan says that Ilmaleh, had it not been that these words were written, it would not have been possible to say it because it's Malamed, that God wrapped himself either over his head, around his body, with a talis, and he said that you say these do these things, and with that I will forgive you. So it's a bris. It's a covenant that God makes that if you say these things in a minyan, then indeed God will forgive us. And the question is, why? What is it, some kind of voodoo? I mean, you say these words, all of a sudden everything changes? What's going on? There's a very cute interpretation, I forget who said it, but it's commonly quoted these days, that if you do the 13 things, you have to actually do it. In other words, you don't just say that God is merciful, you think to yourself, oh, well, I have to walk in God's ways, so if God is merciful, I have to be merciful. And if every Jew would say, I'm going to be merciful, then God will be merciful to us as well. But it doesn't seem like that's the simple meaning of the Talmud. It seems like Talmud is saying that when you say these things, something special happens. Comes Rabbi Ezra Bick, great student of Rabbi Soloveitchik, a great teacher at Yeshivat Har Etzion. Was my son's Rebbe there at Yeshivat Har Etzion. And a new book called Yud Gimel Midot Shel Rachamim, where he explains these 13 principles. And I wanted to share some of his thoughts today. He says, firstly, what does it mean to say these principles? Well, we know that when we say that God is king, something happens. What happens? Well, you see, God, ein melech b'lo am, there's no king without a people. So just to say that God is king, but nobody recognizes him, that doesn't really work. That's why we say, Bayom Hahu Yeh Hashem Echad, that one day God will be king over the whole world, but not today. Today, God is not recognized by all. So when we say God is king, it's a significant act because we're making God king. We coronate God on Rosh Hashanah, for instance, blowing the shofar because the king needs the people to acknowledge his kingship. So too, says Rav Bick, is it true of the Midot of Hashem, that if we say that God is merciful, it's true. If I exist, and it's because God put me here, so God, by definition, is merciful. But if I don't acknowledge it, then there's something lacking in his mercy in the sense that it's not revealed. My job is to reveal God's qualities in this world. So when I reveal how holy he is, that's called the Kedusha, we say, the very holy part of our service. And when I reveal how merciful God is, the Chazan is revealing God. It's not that the Chazan is praying to God that he should be merciful. No, he's revealing God's mercy in this world. He's unveiling God's mercy. The Chazan, so to speak, is a personification, so to speak, of God as mercy. He's telling everyone, letting everyone know, and everyone's reciting it together that indeed God is merciful. So that's what happens. It's the magic that happens when we recite these words. So let's get into them a little bit, and let's see the first five midot. The first five midot of Rachamim, of mercy. Hashem, Hashem. So firstly we say Hashem means he's merciful, Why does it say it twice? He's merciful before we sin and merciful after we sin. Well, firstly, why does God's basic name that he is and he was and he will be, the name, the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God, implies existence that was and is and always will be. However it's pronounced, we don't know, but the letters imply the idea that is, was, and will be. So why does that imply, and why is that the name from God's mercy? We always say that name represents God's mercy. Why? Says Rav Big, very simple. The fact that God exists is an act of mercy. If the fact that we exist the fact that we exist is an act of mercy, because for God to tolerate the imperfect human being that we exist, to create us knowing that we could sin, we have free will, things by definition have atrophy and things deteriorate, to know that and still create us, that was a great act of mercy. But second stage of mercy was when man was created and we actually sinned. We rebelled against God. Now, rebellion is a horrible thing. When you rebel against the king, there's not a lot of mercy that goes on when you rebel against the king. And that's it. One strike and you're out. Off with your head. So theoretically, any rebellion against God, the slightest thing, you eat from this tree, that tree, anything that we do, really, you say, oh, that's just a minor infraction. No, there's no such thing as a minor infraction. If you went against God's will, then really we shouldn't exist altogether. So therefore, the fact that we exist after sin took place means that God wants the world to exist even with sin, which gets into a whole theological, philosophical crisis of, why does God want to have a world that has evil in it and has sinfulness? But he does. So apparently. So therefore, that's God after we sin. It's a separate kindness of God to allow the world to exist even after we have sinned. Kale. Doesn't sound like a principle of God's mercy. Kale just means God, mighty God, like God Almighty. Kale. Kale means like Almighty. Like we say, Mi chamocha ba'elim Hashem, who is like you among the mighty ones? So what does that got to do with God's mercy? So he says, well, let's see. Strong. God's strong. That means God exerts effort. Well, God doesn't really have to exert any effort for anything. So what does that mean? What we would think would be difficult would be easy for God. There's no great feat that God can do. Oh, he makes the dead come back to life. No big deal. Even a human being can clone if we had the right information. God makes millions and millions of planets, billions of galaxies. It's not impressive. That's not a big deal for God. So what does it mean, strength? When you say that God has strength, it has to be a real compliment. You know what strength is? When by nature, he's merciful. By nature, he's a judge. By nature, he's truthful. By nature, he represents the idea of truth and justice. And to take someone who represents truth and justice and say, I'm going to give this guy mercy anyway, that requires strength, right? If you go to the judge and you say, well, this guy murdered somebody and he has no remorse and he's done it 10 times already, and the judge says, I'm letting him off. That would be power. That would be real power. A power that a judge doesn't possess. A judge says, I'm a judge, I can't let him off. You have no mitigating circumstances, I'm letting. So that's power. The power to be merciful. By the way, says Rav Bick, Western culture is influenced by Aristotle and his writings, where to be kind is weak. But here we see that to be kind is strength. Interesting. Then finally, we have the last of the two attributes that we'll talk about in today's video, today's webcast, and that is Rachum and Chanun. Now, you wake me up in the middle of the night and say, what's the difference between Rachum and Chanun? I would say, I don't know, mercy, I don't know. It both sounds like the same thing. So he says now, Rachum is Rachum Bedin. Within the judgment, there's room for mercy. In other words, you go to the judge, very strict judge, you say, did this person murder or not? They murdered. Do they deserve the death penalty? Yes, they do. But then, within the rules of the law, there's room for rachmanus. What's rachmanus? If the person was an abused child, so instead of the execution, maybe we'll give him life in prison. If in addition, the person he killed had been threatening his life for a long time and still he had no right to do it, it was cold blood, but he felt a certain threat. So although the judgment was that he first degree murder, but we could say, due to the mitigating circumstances of his childhood and character witnesses who came and said that he was a good guy, various things. So that is rachmanus, is to have mercy on someone within the law, within the system. But chanun comes from we find it in connection to calling out. If someone screams out to God and says, "Hey, I borrowed $1,000 from this guy. He took my pajamas. Now I'm sleeping in the cold. I'm freezing out here," and he starts crying in the middle of the night, God says, "I'm going to hear that, and because I'm a chanun." What's chanun? This guy doesn't deserve anything. He's borrowed $1,000. He hasn't returned it in 3 years. He lost his pajamas as a surety, and now he's cold. That's the way it is. That's the law. But he says, "No, I'm chanun." Chanun means when someone begs me, I change my mind. So in other words, the judge says, "Forget it, death penalty." He says, "No," he starts crying. So the judge says, "Oh, all right, you're crying, so I'll just give you life in prison." So how does that work? I mean, after all, there's no mitigating circumstances. There were no character witnesses. There was nothing. The judgment was absolute that the fellow should be executed. So the answer is chanun. Chanun is someone who grants someone mercy. You know, he gives someone mercy because sort of pity, sort of like a pity type of thing. So it's different than the others. So we have these 5 midot. Hashem, the fact that the world exists and it's imperfect, and He decided to create it. Good. Hashem again, that means that He wants the world to exist even though there's sin after He saw that there's sin. After I personally may have sinned. Kel, God is strong, so strong that He overcomes His various characteristics of justice to be merciful. Rachum means within judgment, He finds mitigating circumstances to have mercy on us. And chanun means that sometimes He grants us grace even though we don't deserve it. So these are some of the principles of God's mercy. Turn to Rabbi Bick's book for further very insightful philosophical insights into these 13 principles of God's mercy. And then you'll understand what we're saying when we say Hashem, Hashem, Kal Rachum V'Chanun, why there's a bris krusa, that when a person understands what existence is all about, when a whole minyan representing the congregation of Israel gets together and says, we get it that we don't deserve to be here, but we're here anyway, something special happens. God's mercy is revealed in this world, and when that happens, there's a covenant. You spread that word, you do a good PR job for the fact of how merciful God is every single second. I guarantee you, we're going to forgive you for that. That's why this prayer is at the centerpiece of every important emergency prayer, for fast day, for emergency, for Yom Kippur. These are the most important prayers. We hope that God will indeed have mercy on us, and indeed it will redeem us and bring us to the greatest times prophesied in all the prophets of the future. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sephardi Beth El congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee. Join us each week for our discussion of the Parsha and the holidays, and thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit asb.org.